Maria thought her mother was the reason her entire life fell apart. But the truth was far darker. When Dr. Phil pressed her for the real story, she finally broke, right there under the studio lights. Her voice cracked, her hands shook, and what she confessed didn't just stun the audience, it forced the entire show to stop. Maria sat on the edge of her chair, like the floor beneath her might give way at any second. The studio lights washed over her face, making the tears on her cheeks glisten like tiny mirrors. She wasn't looking at Dr. Phil. She wasn't even looking at the audience. Her eyes were locked on the one person she had avoided for 22 years, her mother, Evelyn. Evelyn's hands were clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had turned white. She kept whispering her daughter's name under her breath, almost like a prayer she wasn't sure anyone was listening to. The audience wasn't breathing. Dr. Phil wasn't moving. Everyone was waiting for Maria to continue the confession she had started, then suddenly cut short. Maria's voice trembled as she said, "I thought keeping the secret would protect everyone, but it destroyed me instead." The words hung in the air like smoke, thick, heavy, impossible to ignore. Dr. Phil leaned forward, his tone calm, but piercing, the way someone speaks when they're holding a fragile truth in their hands. He asked her gently, "What are you afraid will happen if you tell the rest?" Maria swallowed hard. She looked down at her hands. That's when viewers noticed the thing she kept gripping, an old, folded, almost crumpled letter. The edges were yellowed, soft from years of being handled and rehandled. She held it like it was alive, or like it had held her hostage. The mini hook formed itself when she whispered, "If I say everything, someone else gets hurt." The audience murmured. A few people in the front row exchanged glances, wondering who that someone else could be. Evelyn shifted in her seat, her face twisting with confusion and fear. She seemed ready to speak, but Dr. Phil gently raised a hand, signaling her to stay silent for a moment longer. Maria finally lifted the letter into view. Her fingers trembled against the creases. "This," she said softly, "is why I ran away. This is why I left home. This is why I thought she ruined my life." Her voice cracked on the last word, and Dr. Phil's entire posture changed. He knew this wasn't just a story about running away, or teenage rebellion, or even resentment. This was something deeper, something buried, something sharp enough to leave a scar for decades. The camera zoomed in slightly, capturing the tension between mother and daughter. Evelyn leaned forward, eyes wide, whispering, "Maria, what letter? You never told me about a letter." Her confusion seemed painfully real, and for the first time, viewers could see the raw fear in her expression, the fear that maybe her daughter had suffered something she never knew about. Maria blinked, wiped her face, and looked straight ahead, almost as if she were talking to her younger self instead of the audience. "I kept it because it was the only thing that made sense of the chaos. I thought it was her handwriting. I thought it was her truth." Her voice shook, and she took a shaky breath. The tension in the room snapped into a mini cliffhanger when Maria added, barely above a whisper, "This letter is the reason I believe she never wanted me, and the reason I disappeared." The studio fell silent again. Not dramatic silence, real silence, the kind that makes you feel your own heartbeat. Dr. Phil glanced at the letter, then back at Maria, and the question he asked next was as gentle as it was devastating. "Maria, are you ready to tell us what it says?" She didn't answer. Instead, she looked at her mother with eyes full of years she could never get back, years shaped by a single moment she thought she understood. As the lights softened and the camera slowly pulled back, the narrator's voice settles in. How many secrets can a family bury before they finally rise to the surface? And when they do, who pays the price? 3 weeks before Maria ever set foot on Dr. Phil's stage, her life was quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet in that heavy way where silence isn't calm, it's a warning. She lived alone in a small apartment outside Phoenix, the kind where the walls were thin and the nights felt longer than they should. Most evenings ended the same. Her sitting on the couch, staring at the glow of the TV without really watching it, trying to outrun memories that never stopped chasing her. That night, the voicemail came in at 9:47 p.m. Maria didn't recognize the number. She almost let it ring out of habit. But something, maybe intuition, maybe exhaustion, made her answer. When she checked the message, her heart froze. The voice was calm, professional but firm. Maria. This is Jenna calling from the Dr. Phil show. Your sister reached out to us. She says your family needs help. She says you're holding on to something that's hurting everyone. Maria replayed the voicemail twice, hoping she misheard. But the message didn't change. Your sister, it said. Not someone claiming to be your sister. Not a relative. No, Lacey, her sister. The same person she hadn't spoken to in 7 years. The mini hook unfolds when Maria stood in her kitchen, gripping the counter, whispering, "Why now? Why her?" She knew Lacey wasn't someone who acted out of emotion. If Lacey had reached out, something had to be wrong. She tried to call back, then hung up before it rang. She wasn't ready. Not for a show. Not for cameras. And definitely not for the past she'd spent years burying. But something inside her wouldn't let the voicemail go. It tugged at her, the way unresolved truths always do. So she waited. She paced. She thought about calling again. Instead, she wandered to her bedroom and opened her closet, pulling out a dusty storage box she'd avoided for years. Inside were fragments of a life she'd tried to forget. Childhood photos, school papers, a small stuffed bear with one missing eye. But buried deeper was something she hadn't expected to see again, a DNA test kit. Still sealed, still untouched, still sitting exactly where she had left it on the night she almost mailed it. As soon as she saw it, the room seemed smaller, hotter, like the walls were pressing in. She remembered why she got the test in the first place. She remembered the fight she'd had with Evelyn that night, the argument about lies and truth and who you really are. A storm of words that had ended with Maria slamming out the door and never coming back. She sat on the floor, holding the kit, and whispered, "If this test is right, my whole childhood was a lie." The line echoed in the room like it had been waiting years to be spoken aloud. More memories surfaced, nightmares she had tried to ignore. As a child, she would wake up crying without knowing why. She remembered flashes of voices arguing, a door slamming, a car driving away fast. Sometimes she'd see a man in her dreams. Shadows, no face, but a voice calling her name in a way that made her wake up sweating. But the worst part wasn't the nightmares. It was the feeling that everyone around her knew something she didn't, and that they were protecting her from it. The emotional tension rose when the phone rang again. Same number, same producer. But this time Maria answered, and she didn't hang up. "Maria," Jenna said softly, "your sister believes you misunderstood something from your childhood. Something important. She wants to help you heal. She's asking if you're willing to talk about it on the show." Maria didn't speak. Her throat felt tight. But Jenna continued, calm and empathetic. "You don't have to decide tonight." But she said there's a reason she reached out now. Something changed in your family. Maria's heart raced. "What changed?" she asked. There was silence on the other end, hesitation, even. Then Jenna exhaled slowly. "Your mother, she's been writing letters to you for years." The world seemed to tilt. Maria felt it. Gravity shifting, breath leaving her body. "She says she wants to tell you the truth," Jenna added. "The real truth." Maria sank to the floor, the DNA kit still in her hand, her heart pounding like it feared what was coming next. Because if Evelyn wanted to talk, if Lacey contacted a national show, if everyone suddenly wanted to tell the truth, then the secret she'd been carrying wasn't hers alone. And maybe, just maybe, she'd been running from the wrong thing. The narrator's voice settles in as the chapter closes. What would you do if the truth threatened to destroy the people you love, but staying silent was destroying you? 3 days after that phone call, Maria finally agreed to fly out for the pre-interview. But the moment she stepped into the studio's quiet preparation room, every memory she'd spent years burying rose like fog around her. She sat across from a producer, a gentle woman named Mira, who spoke with the kind of voice people use when they know the truth is fragile. "Maria," Mira began softly, "before we move forward, we need to understand your childhood. Not the version you've told the world, the version you lived. That sentence alone unlocked something inside her. Maria stared at the table for a long moment before she finally said, "I grew up confused." That's the only word that makes sense. Her voice sounded small, like she was hearing her younger self speak. Because Maria's childhood wasn't loud or violent, not on the surface. It was quiet, uneasy, full of unsaid things and strange visits from relatives who always looked over their shoulders. Evelyn worked long hours, 2 jobs, sometimes 3. She'd come home exhausted, her hands cracked from cleaning chemicals, her eyes swollen from lack of sleep. And yet, she guarded Maria like a hawk. At 9 years old, Maria was smart enough to know what fear looked like. And Evelyn carried fear the way some people carry scars, hidden, but always there. The mini-hook hits when Maria describes one night she never forgot. It was late. She woke up to voices sharp, low, panicked. She tiptoed to the hallway, peeking through the crack of her bedroom door. Evelyn was crying, talking to Maria's aunt, Vanessa. "Papers," Vanessa whispered. "He's asking for papers again." "Custody," Evelyn hissed. "He said the word custody." "I can't." "Vanessa, I can't lose her." 9-year-old Maria didn't know what custody meant, but she knew the word lose, and she saw something she had never seen before, her mother shaking. That moment burned itself into her memory. Back in the studio, Mira leaned forward. "You said in your questionnaire, you always felt like someone was watching your family. What did you mean by that?" Maria hesitated. "When I was little," she said slowly, "there was always a man around. I never saw his face clearly, but I felt him, like a shadow, like someone waiting for the right moment to step forward." "Do you think he was connected to your letter?" Mira asked. Maria nodded, but didn't speak. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out another object she hadn't shown anyone, a tiny hospital bracelet. Her own. The ink was faded, almost unreadable, but there was one part she always wondered about. And now, she finally asked the question. "When I was born, who took me to the hospital?" Her voice cracked. "Because I found something a few years ago that didn't make sense." This was the moment she revealed the sealed envelope from her childhood pediatrician. She had found the doctor through a vague memory, an old office, and a desperate need for answers. The doctor, older now, with kind eyes, remembered her. He remembered Evelyn. He remembered a very scared young mother who refused to give details about the father. But what he gave Maria that day shattered everything she believed. The envelope, still sealed, still heavy in her hands. When she opened it, she expected medical notes, growth charts, immunization records. But instead, she found a single-page intake form from when she was 2 years old. Right at the top, circled in red ink, was the line that made her stomach drop. "Child brought in by non-biological guardian." She remembered reading it 5 times, thinking she misunderstood. She remembered her hands shaking so hard she almost dropped the paper. She remembered calling the doctor back, demanding answers. But the doctor only shook his head and said gently, "Maria, I only wrote what I was told that day." And he didn't remember who brought her in. That was the moment Maria's doubt turned into fear. "Who was I living with?" she whispered to Mira now. The question still as raw as the day she discovered it. Mira didn't answer. She couldn't, because the truth wasn't clear yet, only the shadows around it. Maria's voice softened. "The letter, the bracelet, the intake form. They can't all be mistakes. Someone wasn't telling the truth. Someone kept something from me." The room felt colder, the air heavier, and the past closer. As the chapter closes, the narrator's voice settles in again. Can love exist without the truth? Or is the truth the thing that finally makes love real? The morning after Maria's pre-interview, she woke up in her hotel room with a feeling she hadn't felt in years: urgency. Not panic, not fear, just a quiet, determined pull toward the truth. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the DNA test kit she had brought with her. The same kit she'd avoided for 7 long years. The same kit she once thought might destroy her entire connection to the woman who raised her. This time, she didn't hesitate. She completed the test slowly, carefully, like she was handling something sacred. When she sealed the sample, her hands were trembling. not because she feared the results, but because she feared what they might confirm about her past. She knew the DNA would tell her something factual, scientific, unemotional, but couldn't tell her why Evelyn cried in doorways, why her aunt whispered about papers, why the pediatric intake form said she'd been brought in by someone who wasn't her mother. It would only give her pieces. The rest, she'd have to face on her own. 3 days later, the results arrived digitally. She opened the email with a deep breath, expecting the worst. And then the first line hit her like a punch. Maternal connection, 99.98%, Evelyn Parker. Evelyn was her biological mother. Maria stared at the screen for several seconds, her chest tight. This should have felt like relief, but instead it only added confusion. If Evelyn was her biological mother, then why did the intake form say otherwise? Who was the non-biological guardian? And what was Evelyn hiding that made her cry in the middle of the night all those years ago? But the next section of the test was what changed everything. Paternal match, 50%, Noah Briggs. A name she had never heard. Not once. Not in any story Evelyn ever told her about her father. Not in any family memory. Not in any picture she'd ever seen. Who was this man? As she scrolled down, her pulse quickened. The testing company provided a link to public records for potential relatives. She clicked it instinctively. A profile appeared, grainy, outdated, and unsettlingly vague. But one thing stood out. Address on file, Phoenix Women's Shelter, 1999. Maria felt ice crawl up her spine. She remembered that address. She didn't know why she remembered it, but it lived somewhere deep inside her, like a childhood memory she thought was a dream. That's when she dug further. In the prep room before the main taping, Maria asked the studio team if they could request archived documents from that shelter. She didn't expect much, but 10 minutes before she was called on stage, a staff member rushed in holding a thin manila folder. Inside were scanned copies of an old visitor entry log from the Phoenix Women's Shelter. She started scanning the pages. Names, dates, signatures she didn't recognize, until she turned to the page marked December 3rd, 1999, the week she remembered moving in with her aunt briefly. And there it was. Visitor, Noah Briggs. Purpose, requesting child access. Outcome denied. Escorted out. Maria stared at the name, her breath lodged in her throat. She flipped to the next page, hoping to find something, anything, that would explain what happened. And she did. Another entry, 6 days later. Individual returned. Verbally aggressive. Claimed child was taken from him. Shelter staff intervened. Something inside her cracked. She remembered the nightmares. The shadowy man. The voice calling her name from the darkness. She remembered Evelyn's constant fear. And suddenly, the puzzle pieces weren't just confusing. They were horrifying. She needed to hear the truth from Evelyn herself. The same afternoon, just moments before walking out to face Dr. Phil, she found Evelyn in the backstage waiting area. Evelyn looked older than Maria remembered. More tired, more worn, but still holding that same trembling strength that defined her entire life. Maria didn't even sit down. She placed the DNA results, the shelter logs, and the pediatric intake form onto the table. Slowly, one piece at a time, like evidence in a trial. "Mom, who is Noah Briggs?" Evelyn froze. Her shoulders lifted slightly, like the question physically struck her. The room suddenly felt too small, too loud, even though no one moved or spoke. Evelyn's eyes filled instantly, not with guilt, but with a grief Maria didn't understand yet. She whispered, "Maria, I was trying to keep you safe." The words cracked open a dam neither of them were ready for. Maria stepped back, confused and angry. Safe from what? Safe from him? Why didn't you tell me? Her voice rose, desperate and broken. Why did I grow up thinking you were the one who hurt me? And that's when Evelyn finally said it. The confession that would change everything. Because, Maria, he found us once. And that letter you kept? It wasn't from me. The world stopped. Her legs went weak. Every doubt, every fear, every sleepless night, every memory she never understood. It all pressed in on her at once. Evelyn reached out, but paused, letting her hand hover inches from Maria's arm. "I didn't give you that letter," she whispered. "I didn't write those words. I would never push you away." Maria stared at her mother, tears filling her eyes, not from pain, but from the sudden, terrifying realization that she had been wrong about everything. As the chapter closes, the narrator's voice returns, low and steady. When truth and fear collide, which one do we run from? And which one ends up chasing us for the rest of our lives? When Maria walked back onto the stage, clutching the letter in her, and she felt like she was carrying the last 22 years of her life in a single piece of paper. The audience watched her return to her seat with a silence so deep it felt like the whole room was holding its breath. Evelyn sat across from her, shaking, praying, waiting. Dr. Phil leaned in gently. "Maria, whenever you're ready." Maria unfolded the letter slowly, the paper cracking slightly at the corners. It had been folded so many times it looked like it was aging alongside her. For years, she believed every word written inside, believed it came from her mother, believed it was the reason she ran, the reason she left, the reason she convinced herself Evelyn never wanted her. But now, she wasn't so sure of anything. Her voice trembled as she began to read. "You don't belong here. You were never supposed to be with her. I'm coming for you soon." But the doctor only shook his head and said gently, "Maria, I only wrote what I was told that day." And he didn't remember who brought her in. That was the moment Maria's doubt turned into fear. "Who was I living with?" she whispered to Mira now. The question still as raw as the day she discovered it. Mira didn't answer. She couldn't, because the truth wasn't clear yet, only the shadows around it. Maria's voice softened. "The letter, the bracelet, the intake form. They can't all be mistakes. Someone wasn't telling the truth. Someone kept something from me." The room felt colder, the air heavier, and the past closer. As the chapter closes, the narrator's voice settles in again. Can love exist without the truth? Or is the truth the thing that finally makes love real? The morning after Maria's pre-interview, she woke up in her hotel room with a feeling she hadn't felt in years. Urgency. Not panic. Not fear, just a quiet, determined pull toward the truth. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the DNA test kit she had brought with her. The same kit she'd avoided for 7 long years. The same kit she once thought might destroy her entire connection to the woman who raised her. This time, she didn't hesitate. She completed the test slowly, carefully, like she was handling something sacred. When she sealed the sample, her hands were trembling. Not because she feared the results, but because she feared what they might confirm about her past. She knew the DNA would tell her something factual, scientific, unemotional. But it couldn't tell her why Evelyn cried in doorways, why her aunt whispered about papers, why the pediatric intake form said she'd been brought in by someone who wasn't her mother. It would only give her pieces. The rest, she'd have to face on her own. 3 days later, the results arrived digitally. She opened the email with a deep breath, expecting the worst. And then the first line hit her like a punch. Maternal connection, 99.98%. Evelyn Parker. Evelyn was her biological mother. Maria stared at the screen for several seconds, her chest tight. This should have felt like relief, but instead it only added confusion. If Evelyn was her biological mother, then why did the intake form say otherwise? Who was the non-biological guardian? And what was Evelyn hiding that made her cry in the middle of the night all those years ago? But the next section of the test was what changed everything. Paternal match, 50%, Noah Briggs. A name she had never heard. Not once. Not in any story Evelyn ever told her about her father. Not in any family memory. Not in any picture she'd ever seen. Who was this man? As she scrolled down, her pulse quickened. The testing company provided a link to public records for potential relatives. She clicked it instinctively. A profile appeared, grainy, outdated, and unsettlingly vague. But one thing stood out. Address on file, Phoenix Women's Shelter, 1999. Maria felt ice crawl up her spine. She remembered that address. She didn't know why she remembered it, but it lived somewhere deep inside her, like a childhood memory she thought was a dream. That's when she dug further. In the prep room before the main taping, Maria asked the studio team if they could request archive documents from that shelter. She didn't expect much, but 10 minutes before she was called on stage, a staff member rushed in holding a thin manila folder. Inside were scanned copies of an old visitor entry log from the Phoenix Women's Shelter. She started scanning the pages. Names, dates, signatures she didn't recognize. The studio stiffened. Evelyn covered her mouth, shaking her head violently. Maria, that's not my handwriting. I swear to you, I would never. But Maria continued reading. She stole you from me. She knows what she did. When the time is right, I'll take you back, and she won't be able to stop it. She paused. Her eyes glistened. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she finished the line that had haunted her childhood. Don't trust her. Trust me. The room felt colder than it had moments before. Dr. Phil looked at the letter with a seriousness that signaled something big was coming. He asked, Maria, did you ever compare this handwriting to anything else? Any other documents? Maria nodded slowly. Only once. It didn't match anything of hers. Not bills. Not school forms. Not cards. Nothing. But I thought she was lying because the alternative scared me too much. She looked toward Evelyn, and for the first time, the anger in her eyes softened. Mom, I didn't want to believe you would write something like this, but I didn't know what else to think. I was a kid. I didn't understand. Evelyn finally spoke, tears streaming down her face. Sweetheart, he wrote that. Noah wrote that letter. He followed us. He watched us. He tried to take you once before. I hid you because I was terrified he'd try again. Dr. Phil nodded, then looked toward the side of the stage. We actually asked our team to do some digging. A producer handed him a folder. And Maria, I think you need to see this. He opened the folder and pulled out a document, an official police report. The date, February 2001. The location, Phoenix Women's Shelter. The subject, Noah Briggs. Dr. Phil read the key section aloud. Suspect apprehended on charges of harassment and attempted visitation of minor without custody rights. Suspect claimed the child was taken from him and listed the child's name as Maria, recorded as missing. The audience gasped. Maria stared at the report, her breath caught somewhere between her chest and her throat. The world around her faded. All she could hear was the rushing of her own heartbeat and the echo of Evelyn's earlier words. I was trying to keep you safe. And suddenly it made sense. The nightmares, the shelter, the intake form, the fear, the secrecy, the letter, all of it. Not because Evelyn didn't love her, not because Evelyn didn't want her, but because Evelyn was trying to protect her from a man who believed he owned her. The emotional shift in the room was powerful. Confusion melting into realization, fear turning into empathy. Maria's face crumpled. She looked at Evelyn not with accusation, but with heartbreak. Mom, she whispered, her voice trembling. All this time, I thought you pushed me away. I thought you didn't want me. I thought you were the one hurting me. Evelyn reached out, but stopped again, waiting for permission. Maria didn't hesitate this time. She took her mother's hand, and for the first time in years, their fingers intertwined like they used to when Maria was small. You didn't ruin my life, she said softly, tears slipping down her cheeks. You saved it. The audience exhaled together, a mix of shock, relief, and something deeper, recognition. Because this wasn't just a story about a hidden truth. It was a story about how misunderstanding can turn love into fear and fear into distance. Maria pressed the letter against her chest. I held on to this because I thought it was the only truth I had. Her voice steadied. But now I know the truth isn't in the letter. It's in everything you did to protect me. And as the camera slowly pulled back, the narrator's voice settled into a quiet reflection. How do we forgive someone when the truth arrives too late? And how do we forgive ourselves for believing the wrong story for so long? When the taping reached its final segment, the energy in the studio felt completely different than when it began. It wasn't heavy anymore. It wasn't tense. It was soft, like the moment after a storm when everything is still wet and broken, but somehow clearer. Maria sat beside her mother now, not across from her. Their chairs had been moved closer, almost touching, a silent signal that something inside them had shifted. Dr. Phil handed Maria a new envelope, this one clean, white, and freshly sealed. "Your mother wrote this last night," he said gently. "She asked if you'd be willing to read it here, but only if you feel ready." Maria looked at Evelyn with searching eyes, and for the first time, Evelyn didn't look away. She nodded slowly, as if giving her daughter permission to walk toward a truth she'd waited decades to share. Maria opened the envelope carefully, like she was afraid of tearing more than just the paper. Her hands shook, but her voice steadied as she began to read. "My sweet girl, I want to tell you the truth 1,000 times. I wrote letters. I rehearsed words. I almost told you on your 10th birthday, and then again the night you left home. But every time I tried, fear stole the voice right out of me." Evelyn covered her face, quietly crying as Maria continued. "I didn't hide the truth because I didn't love you. I hid it because I loved you so much it scared me. I thought if you knew how close we came to losing you, you'd never feel safe again. I failed at protecting your childhood, but I hope I haven't failed at protecting your heart." A quiet sob slipped from Maria, barely audible, but real enough to break the audience. She wasn't crying from pain anymore. These are the tears that come when the truth finally stops running, stands still, and lets you breathe. Dr. Phil leaned forward. "Maria, what do you want to say to your mother right now?" Maria folded the letter, pressing it to her chest. She turned toward Evelyn, her voice shaky but full. "Mom, I didn't know. I didn't know any of it. And I wish I had. I wish I'd known you were trying to save me, not push me away." Evelyn reached for her hand, and this time Maria didn't hesitate. She took it, held it, clung to it in a way that said she was holding years of hurt and healing at the same time. "I'm sorry," Evelyn whispered. "I'm so sorry for everything you had to carry alone." Maria shook her head. "We both carried it, just in different ways." The room was silent again, not tense but reverent. Like everyone there understood, they were witnessing not just a confession, but a rebirth. Two people trying to rebuild something that had cracked under the weight of secrets, but never fully shattered. As the conversation softened, Dr. Phil shifted the tone gently. "Maria, earlier today you mentioned wanting to do something with the truth now that you finally have it. Would you like to share that with your mother?" Maria nodded. She took a breath that seemed to steady her entire body. "Mom, I want to help people like you. Moms who are running from someone dangerous. Kids who don't know what's happening around them. I want to make sure no one else grows up thinking the wrong parent was the villain." Evelyn's face broke into the kind of smile that only appears when pain and pride collide. "So," Maria continued, "I'm going to testify next month at the hearing for new domestic survivor protections. Laws that help parents who have to hide their kids to keep them safe. I want to use our story to help someone else." The audience erupted into soft applause, not loud or flashy, but warm, heartfelt, the kind that carries gratitude. For the first time in a long time, Maria looked hopeful. As the camera pulled back, Dr. Phil closed the moment in the only way he could: calm, compassionate, steady. Sometimes the truth doesn't break a family. Sometimes it's the only thing that can put it back together. Maria squeezed her mother's hand. "Maybe the truth didn't destroy us, Mom," she said quietly. "Maybe it's what sets us free." As mother and daughter leaned toward each other, the narrator's voice gently settles over the final image. What legacy do we leave when we choose truth over silence and healing over fear? What happens when we stop running from the past and finally let it speak? Family secrets can feel heavy, but speaking them out loud can be the first step toward healing. If this story touched something in you, share your thoughts in the comments. You never know who might need your truth today. And if you'd like more stories about family, forgiveness, and finding yourself again, stay with us. There's more ahead.